if you want to get into that detail. I want to give you all the nuts and bolts of it, where all the skeletons are, and then we'll start putting the meat on the bones as we go through the next iteration of it, and then final up the details. So, with that as a precursor, I'd like to get started. Again, I want to go over the existing subdivision ordinance, which was, the original one was written in 1992. The last update was in 2002. So it's been 10 years since anybody's looked at it. Quickly discuss the requirements of it. Talk about the additional requirements you might want to see in the new ordinance. And then talk about one of the new requirements in the new ordinance is what we're calling the city design manual. And we'll get into the details on that shortly. Your existing and proposed development fees. And we've got a really good comparison here. It's pretty stark to show what you charge versus what everybody around charges. And then discuss the modifications and rewrites and the scheduling and all that other stuff, and we go there. And then this leads into the next task, which we'll talk about, future land planning as you become the development, as development occurs. Your goal as council and P&Z is always to have a look over the horizon to see what's coming, to make sure that things are progressing the way you anticipate a city is supposed to grow and prosper. To the existing ordinance, section 1.1, just so you know, your subdivision ordinance says anybody owning a tract of land within the corporate limits and the ETJ. So you've seen the big demonstration. We've got a couple, I know Bill talks about the donuts in the ETJ, but the big map, we've got, I forget how many square miles it is, Bob. 70 square miles of ETJ in total land area that you're going to be responsible for. It's just not going to be little old Van Alstyne going forward as you see that. And section 1.2 says, and I put this in here just because it is the intention of the city council that the principles, standards, and requirements shall be minimum requirements for platting and developing subdivisions within the city and the ETJ. That was the original goal. That should still be, I assume that's still the goal, and it should always be the goal. These are the minimum requirements. People want to come in with brass polished gates and all this other stuff. Come on, we like that kind of thing. Section 2 deals with definitions, which is a new one that gets quite extensive. And the purpose and authority says that no subdivision can be filed or recorded, and no lot in a subdivision in the city or ETJ can be sold until the plat is approved by the council. So if you have a property and you're dividing it in any way, once you go to 2 from 1, it's supposed to go through the P&Z and to the council for approval on a plat. That's the current law. Again, when you hear us talk about this a lot, approval procedures for approving a plat. You got the final plat, the preliminary plat for subdivisions, and then the final plat, so that you get a look at what it. And each of those records by state law, you have 30 days to respond. If you do nothing in that 30 days, the plat is automatically accepted and then filed. So you have the right to do something, but you've got to do it in the first 30 days if you don't like the way it's done or you want revisions to it. And technically, I guess, Regina, if a plat comes in that is technically correct with the ordinances and zoning and everything else, there is no grounds for objection or anything. You just don't like it. It really doesn't matter. It's technically correct. It's got to go forward. So to make those objections, we have to put that kind of teeth into the subdivision ordinance so that you have a reason if you really don't like something, either in the zoning or the subdivision ordinance. Otherwise, technically, if they follow this letter of the law, you have set the law and they're just following it. So you have no...
These become your objective standards, and you're allowed to deny it if they don't meet your objective standards.
Right. So
These are the ones that we're replacing, right?
Yes,
The ones
yeah.
from now.
Right. These are the ones now, a lot of these same requirements will carry over because the state law hasn't changed on them, but that's, that's what it is. Section 5 talks about what the form should look like and things like that. Sections, what each plat should look like, the number of copies and all that other stuff. That's a technicality. Again, I don't want to dive into the details if we need 10 or 9 or 8, but that's in there. The new ordinance is a little bit different, so we'll as we work through this with Regina and Jennifer, we're going to tidy that up and make sure we got the right, because Grayson County has a size requirement on every plat that's filed. Collin County has a different size requirement, so we have to filter through all that and make all that work. Section 6 is general provisions is the first section where you really start putting the teeth into your ordinance. And section 6.1 is about parks and open space requirements. When a subdivision comes in of greater than 40 acres, you require a 5% dedication of land or the equivalent value of the 5%. Okay, so that means when you come in with a 40-acre or larger subdivision, you're getting the green space that you would expect to see, that, the park for that neighborhood, basically. Or a school site. A school site could be part of that 5%. Or, it's a negotiation between the city and the developer at that point, what that 5% is for. Most developers, and they'll come in and they'll give you, we'll give you the floodplain. Well, the city doesn't necessarily want the floodplain. That's the high maintenance area. That's the flood damage area. So, that's part of the negotiations and going forward. Easements, dedication for public use, diversity of ownership is all about. If you have a multi-tenant shopping center, and each person owns, a section of that building, it's just saying that they've all got to agree to come in and do that for you. And then talks about, like Georgetown, there was several phases. They came in and it allows you to parcel out and build 20 or 40 acres at a time and just continue to keep growing. And then the group development is, again, the multi-tenant. Everybody's got to come on board and everybody's got to adhere to the same language once you come in. And then these are all about the capital improvements that need to be done. Monuments, we need subdivision monuments so we can find them with property for surveying, things like that. Just so you know, we are currently in the final, we're set about half of we're putting in new city monuments. I forgot to ask Frank, but we got 2-inch aluminum discs going around the city right now on public sites. We're going to require that all subdivisions tie into those so that our mapping, once we get the network set, all the mapping, when you get a subdivision, typically it won't fit in the piece that you have on the parcel map. Well, by putting in the monuments and doing all this, we're going to get everything so everything starts fitting a whole lot better. It's easier to do. All the public improvements, storm drainage. Your only requirement in storm drainage in your existing ordinance is that you have an adequate storm sewer system. I dare anybody to tell me what adequate means. So, and then water supply, sewer, underground utilities, and then the record drawings when we get them. And then Section 8 gets into a little bit of the detail of what's required, especially with, how that the proposed subdivision meets your land use plan. How many of you have seen the land use plan lately? Jim, if you want to hold it up, then I've got a copy here too. This was done in 2003. This is your current land use plan for all 70 square miles, okay?
You're upside down.
Oh, yeah.
House to the north.
It looked right for me for where I was going. But yellow being your residential areas, red being your commercial areas and your freeway areas, and I'm colorblind, so as I go to blue and grays and greens, they all kind of blur together on me. But this was done about 12 years ago now. When we talk about future, we'll talk about when do you want to address this again? Because right now, at the extent you've developed, I mean, I think you're in good shape. I don't think much has changed over the last 10 to 12 years where you're at, but that's, you know, your goal with the subdivision though is the subdivision related to the zoning, related to the land use plan. That's kind of your back, you know, that's how you can trip up as a council and P and Z. Not, you know, if it's master plan residential and it's zoned commercial and I'm putting in industrial, you know, there's something, we've got to fix that. So that's what this is. Then it also talks about streets and what the geometry is on streets. And again, I mentioned earlier the city design manual. I would propose to put all that kind of information that's not required in a subdivision ordinance in your city design manual, so that when somebody comes in, here's your city, here's what your city design manual looks like, here's what your streets are supposed to look like, the right-of-ways, the lanes, all this. Here's where your water and sewer fit in those street right-of-ways. Here's where your public utilities, here's what your screening looks like. You know, you have one document that you can go to that has all that information in one place, so that, you know, everything jives. And you don't have one ordinance saying one thing and, you know, a design guide talking about something else. Yeah, this is from that master plan, and these are your. Oops, well, I gave you a blow-up copy of that in your packet if you want to see what those streets look like. But right now, your arterials are 120-foot right-of-ways.
But
Your
in your PowerPoint.
Yeah, I've got the small versions, but I did some of the blow-up sections, full-page sections in their handouts. But those are your current guidelines right now. And what it is 120, you've got your 6-lane divided thoroughfares have 12-foot lanes, so it's a 37-foot pavement on each half of that roadway. What I like about it is your minimum in a 50-foot right-of-way for local residential is a 31-foot right-of-way, which is about 5 or 6 foot wider than you'll see in Plano, Richardson, Garland, and McGinney. Most of them have a 25-foot paved section. So you're allowing for a lot more parking. You're giving the reason to park on the streets. With doing that, you got a wider street, but it creates a more, you know, freeing, you know, it's an open space, freeing perception as you're driving down the street. So, and then it talks about how the lots should be struck, you know, within the subdivisions, how the blocks should be done, what the building lines, alleys, easements, floodplains, all that stuff. And I guess everybody has, I mean, I don't know of any mobile home parks in the city limits themselves, but, you know, that's part of the zoning, and then eventually part of the subdivision ordinance. Are you going to allow mobile home parks in your ETJ? So, until they become incorporated in the city, if you don't want them in the city. So, and Regina will have to address the legalities of that, but, you know, this is while we're talking about this, if mobile homes are not an option, then we probably need to say something about that and make sure that that's addressed. Permits, and then city participation in improvements. This gives a broad brush. It's kind of like adequate drainage. This says the city can only participate when it's not for the primary development or primary benefit of the development, but oversizing and ultimate paving sections can be used to require city participation in the development. And I'll get into some actualities as we get further down about when we would want to participate in that. And then the city can accept an escrow in lieu of constructing the facilities, like we did when Driscoll Hill plans got approved a couple months ago. you know, they would have been required to build their half of County Line Road to the 6-lane section. And it was agreed, the developer agreed that he would escrow at the time of platting in lieu of having to build just that 700-foot section of a 6-lane divided and then switch back and forth between, you know, that creates a lot of planning. So we use the escrow when we don't have big chunks of road to build. You know, if we've got, you know, and part of this too, you know, the Georgetown along Kelly Road, there should have been escrow collected with that, but since it was platted 10 years ago and it's not being replatted and it's not doing this, so, you know, the city's gonna be stuck building that half of Kelly Road on the east side, you know, on the northbound side of that based on not having collected any escrow from the Georgetown development when it platted. So when things are platting and when they want to identify a property and then get your permits and all that, that's when you have the hammer. Once you give that hammer away, you're probably not going to get it back. So we need to be, and then reservations, construction fees, variances, and all that. That's all, everything that's in here. And I'll talk about this in the new one. The current penalty for violation of any section of this is $1,000 a day. Per day, you can be fined for if you don't follow part of that. And it talks about filing fees, the maintenance bonds, conflicts, and the saving clause, all the legal stuff. I'll skim through because I don't know much about that either. Just other than, so that's kind of what's covered in your current ordinance. We want to talk about what needs to be updated, and then we need to talk about what's missing too. Not only are there things in here that need to be updated, but we also need to talk about what's missing. What needs to be updated? Definitions, and we went from about 3 pages of definitions to about 8 pages of definitions, so I think we're getting pretty close on those. Authority and approval. The council indicated at their couple council meetings ago that they wanted to transfer final plat authority approval to the P&Z. That's not in this ordinance, and it is indicated in this one. So that's one of the changes that you've made. Again, I talked about the plat form and content, the size, number of copies, and where it's going to the county. We'll get all that figured out with Jennifer and Regina, and figuring out if you're in Grayson County, you're going to do it this way. If you're in Collin County, you're going to do it this way, and just so everybody, but the content and everything's going to be the same. The monumentation and mapping we talked about. Drainage requirements. Again, adequate is adequate. So I want to talk about that. There are no water and sewer design guidelines. You know, is the sewer line in the center of the street? Is it in the East Parkway, the West Parkway, North and South Parkway? We need to get it, as the new subdivisions come in, we're trying to get it homogeneous so that when Steve goes out and has a problem, he knows what he's going to be facing as he gets out to these locations and does that. So Bob and Steve have been working together on getting the water and sewer part of the city design manual together so that we've got the right, and we're also going to have in there the right manufacturers and the right inventory so that when Steve goes out to make a repair, he's got the right pieces and he doesn't have to wait and go get something else. And then the street design guidelines. You know, you do have that map, that cross-section of those streets, but it doesn't have anything about geotechnical or the structure of the street. It just says how it just has geometry. It doesn't have how to build it, and we want to talk about that. Mobile homes, again, that discussion. Are mobile homes going to be allowed? What the street signs, and Steve's got a specific standard and stuff, so we need to add that and get that included. How you want to do street lighting in subdivisions, that'll be addressed. Again, the parks and open space. You already got a 5% requirement on development. You also, we also need to be thinking about a master parks plan so that you know, we've got the trail plan that we got approval from the council to go forward and make that request for funding for the phase, but we, you know, those trails need to be leading to something, and, you know, Forestmore Park and North Park and the schools and all that other stuff is exactly what that kind of planning effort will be. We need to talk about the city participation requirements. Developers come in and oversize, or we ask them to do things in addition to what's on their site, so there needs to be a city participation policy available for the developers so that they know, they have some assurance that they can get paid back for doing things for the city that the city's not going to do at that time. Again, as part of that is the oversize policy. You know, if developer only needs an 8-inch line for his subdivision to feed the water and sewer, and we're asking him to put a 12 or 16 in because it'll be a major branch for the master plan, then the city is responsible for that oversize charge. So that's why we need to make sure we do that. And then the reservations, which are right-of-ways, parks, playgrounds, and the school sites. You know, again, the master plan of those open spaces so that you can have that done. And then talk about the penalties. Right now, it's $1,000 a day. The new ordinance is proposing $2,000 a day. So,
Is that a penalty now? Is that a civil or a criminal penalty? Civil.
and then talk about the bonds. Right now, I think everybody's happy with the bond. Right now, you currently require a 2-year, 100% maintenance bond. So the first 2 years after a subdivision is constructed, there is a 2-year maintenance. So if anything on it, water, sewer, paving, lights, you know, whatever breaks, you have a bond. If the developer won't get his contractor to come back and fix it, you have a bond and an insurance company that will come in and do that for you. So. Again, the design criteria, there's very little here right now other than that street cross-section there. But street, water, sewer, streets, drainage, geotechnical and commercial lighting all need to be addressed. And what we're going to do, we're going to put those in right now in the city design manual. We've been working on that for a few months, putting all those things in there. The things that we need direction from you from are landscape, parks, and screening, which I'll go through and give you some typicals. And when we're looking at these right now, we're using Plano, Frisco, McKinney, and a little bit of Richardson, a little bit of Garland. Now, the only problem with using something like Frisco's engineering design guidelines, it's 387 pages long. And you know, and see, Garland's is 87 pages long. I mean, Plano has a manual for every, you know, Plano has a thoroughfare street, and then they have a collector street manual, and then they have a local street manual, and then they have a, you know, they have a manual for everything, which is great, but you have to, we're trying to get everything into one nice big package so that when we hand out the city design manual, this is everything you should need to know that how Van Alstyne wants it built. And that's kind of our goal with this. And then this is the part that's going to take the legal and everything, but participation policies, part where city requested improvement, you know, whether it's oversizing a water or sewer main or oversizing the street, and then off-site extensions. Because if you're like any other city that's had development go on, it doesn't start at the core and work its way gradually out. There's usually one guy out here that comes in, so you got to fill in the gap to get to him. So that there's an in-between section that always has to be filled. And this helps you set up that policy and procedure on how to do that. Talk about developer escrow, whether in lieu of construction. You know, when is the time to require the escrow versus requiring them to pay their share. Pro rata is something that you don't have. for that person that put in that distant subdivision, that gap that the city participated in, well, once those infill people start filling in, they technically have a responsibility for their share of that was put in. So the city gets reimbursed, and/or if that developer fronted all that cost, there's a pro rata share of that fill in the gap solution that's due back to the person that had to put up that upfront cost. You know, they extended it for their subdivision, yes, but they also improved it along somebody else's property. So there's and then impact fees, you've already approved the new impact fees about a year and a half ago, and we're working on those. And then the reimbursement funding mechanism. Right now, if you've got the escrow money in hand and you've got money to play with, it's not city money at this point, then you could be able to do that and reimburse them. But Richardson and Plano, every time they have a bond program for improvements, they typically throw in, you know, if they have a $25 or $30 million bond program for streets and drainage, they'll throw in 10% or so for development reimbursement. So you've kind of created a fund that you basically give that developer an IOU saying, we'll pay you the next time, and then when the next time comes up, it'll be the next bond program, or the next funding mechanism that you would do. So, okay, the first thing, theory and philosophy, is screening walls. You have no requirements for arterial screening or screening between separate zonings right now, other than a solid 6-foot screen. And it could be wood, or it could be, you know, if it's between like the Golden Chick and the properties behind it, they were required to put up a solid wood fence, or it could be a masonry fence. There was, and neither one of those was, you know, with the utilities that were back there, that wasn't an option. So having and allowing the living screen was an option. So, and then driving along, well, I got it on, yeah, the first picture, Kelly Road. Once Kelly Road develops, this is going to be your side view. You're going to see brick and landscape at the entry points. You're going to see old fence. You're going to see new fence. You're going to see old fence, new fence, old fence. And eventually it becomes all old fence, old fence, old fence. And, you know, if this is part of the policy decisions here, is that, you know, view along, you know, I've lived in Plano for 30 some odd years, and the masonry canyons are pretty boring. And they're pretty expensive now. I mean, last time I checked with the Public Works, they have over $1 million a year in their repair budget just for masonry walls. So to go back in and just require 100% masonry, you get that canyon effect. I mean, you get the benefits of the sound. You know, it reduces the sound on the other side of the wall from the vehicles, but you get, you know, there's a maintenance issue. You know, Plano's now 30 years into that requirement, and now they're probably at $1.5 million in just a masonry wall repairs a year. So, you know, that just decision you make today, out, you know, when you're the size of Plano, you know, maybe $1 million isn't that big a deal, but that seems like a pretty big deal to me. So, I mean, you know, here's the solid screening wall and the details on it. You know, you require trees every so often to break it up, where the sidewalk is, what size the sidewalk is, what, you know, where those are required between residential and non-residential. You usually have a solid screening wall to separate that zoning. And then along the thoroughfares, you have that also. That's the Plano effect. And then out here, Plano's pretty flat, Richardson's pretty flat, Garland's pretty flat, but here you're going to have the opportunity to probably maybe tier some of this as your roads go up and down through the hills, especially out east, and well, out west too, for that matter. You'll have the opportunity to tier, you know, basically get the screening wall with a tiered landscape effect, which would be That'd be a great idea when it works, but, you know, you gotta have, the geometry's gotta work for that. And then, here's the mixed, you got screening with ornamental fence on it, so you got some green, you got some masonry, and it all works in between. So, you know, and that's kind of becoming the popular go-to one right now. And then the fourth one is the 100% living screen. So, and there is let's see, I think there is a fence. The private fence is the homeowner fence. So on that picture of Kelly Road, do you think just putting trees between there and the private wood fence is the appropriate? Or do you require an ornamental fence on there? So those are kind of the options that they are. Again, you know, Plano, Frisco, McKinney, and Richardson all allow that, but it's all by special permit. So, and here's kind of a table going. The solid fence, everybody accepts that. No questions asked if you're just coming in with that. The topo change, Frisco has a policy for that. Nobody else really does, but I don't think they ever run into that. The combination fence, everybody does it. Richardson doesn't. They do allow it with a special permit, and then the living screen is by special permit.
And just like Larry, currently it is a criminal offense to violate. What we want to work towards is a civil offense. Correct. Oh, it's still criminal?
It's still criminal.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have something
Okay.
I'll
Because of when
Yeah, I have to change.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'll talk about the penalties again when we get towards the end. You know, yeah, that's outside. I'll leave that to the experts. I'll leave that to somebody. And right now, landscape requirements, the city of Van Alstyne has none. When O'Reilly's came in and they wanted to know, they asked me, they said, well, what size plants do we have to have there? How many trees do we have to have? How much of it can be ground cover and all that other stuff? I'm like, your choice. And every other city right now does not have, you know, there are minimum requirements for landscaping in every one of these other cities. They want to see a tree every 30 to 40 to 50 feet. They want to see, some of them have required, in parking lots, for example, they have required, so many square feet per parking spot. It must be landscaped, you know, must be green, whether it's
A lot of them have a percentage of the lot, or
Yeah.
a percentage of the surface area.
Right.
Has to be landscaped.
And then, as Frank's talked about, you know, if you do decide to put in a landscape requirement, we would recommend that, you know, the easiest way to enforce it would be a coverage percentage. And I've got a couple of cities and what they require coming forward. We would, because of the water crisis and everything lately, we would hope that you would enforce drought-tolerant species that require little water as possible. That how many trees and everything else should be in there. Develop an approved species list so that, you know, the live oak is okay, and, whatever sycamore is not, a hackberry definitely isn't, you know, whatever trees they want to put in that you kind of have. Here's what our template looks like. And then the irrigation requirements, and then whether or not, and there's you want to have a tree preservation ordinance or a tree preservation section of the ordinance. Meaning that if you're going to go in and take out trees caliber 8 inches or bigger, there's a compensation for new plantings of there's so many new plantings per inch caliber that you take out while you're cleaning your site or, doing that. And again, that would be on specimen trees, not on hackberries or godarks or the junk trees.
What's helped us on landscaping, O'Reilly's being an example, was Bill Benton helped us significantly on making sure that the builder did put in landscaping because we're trying to get a consistent standard. So it's not necessarily his responsibility, but it does want to make sure that the value is maintained on his property. So Bill's not going to be able to do that with everything, but we need to be able to establish that standard moving forward.
And then here's that landscape coverage percentage I was telling you about, and then whether or not there's this tree list. Garland and McKinney use 15%. Basically, if you have a non-residential lot, 15% of that area on that property, doesn't include parkways and right-of-ways, is required to be landscaped. Plano does it based on a square foot, based on the number of parking spots, and Frisco does too. And then Richardson has 7 to 10% based on the size of the building. Once you get to 75,000 square feet of a building, then you go to 10%. Otherwise, you can be down to 7%. So that's kind of, and then all but Richardson and knowing the tree Nazi in Richardson, it says staff review, but there is a there is a tree list in Richardson, although it's not officially. I worked with her for 20 years, so yeah, she's pretty religious about what trees are allowed and which ones aren't. So, but that's that's kind of. And then there are no guidelines for what you want to see in the park. Whether what playgrounds look like, whether there's splash pads and pools. We've kind of got a trail program, but we don't have how they intermingle with the parks. And then again, the planting details that you would want to see in city parks and things like that. So, and again, drought tolerant species, the trees, and then the irrigation requirements. So that the whole parks thing is kind of a.
We did try and incorporate into the trails plan, getting to McKinney Wilson. Of course, North Park is integrated into phase 1, which is what we're seeking funding for right now. However, we haven't quite made the connection to Forest Moore. So you'd have to go through the elementary property where our train went to the elementary property and the whole phase out of the trail. So you would be able to make it going over the bridge, but that's the only part that's currently left out.
We've taken baby steps towards getting these things integrated, but there has not been a plan or a kind of a an oversight of what, this is what we want Van Alstine parks and trails and the intermingling of the common spaces to look like. So that's something that's out there.
We'd ultimately like to link up to the Collin County trails as the cities develop out, coming up out of Mesh West. So that's an ultimate objective, but that is something that we need to have really some time to look at and consider, and seeing where Anna's going to be running their trails as well as Weston and some of the other cities. So,
This gives Van Alstine a chance too to do it the way they want. If you do it before all development happens, it's easier to set aside property and do the development right. And as Wayne said, when Raleigh comes in, they were expecting something. So it's not like they're going to come in and whine about having to do something. They're already expecting to have to do something because it's standard in most other cities. So it's good that we're doing this because we'll have something that the staff can show to them where they can go to the website and say, okay, here's what we have to do. So they're not surprised.
And it's something, especially in our farms, because we cannot have basically a park that has adequate parking.
Yeah.
At the
that ought to be
south
done.
end, they're
I
on
left the-
Highway 5.
I left the bullet off of this slide. Parking
Right
requirements,
there.
yes. Yeah, one of the biggest problems with parks is parking. That's why you like to kind of stretch them out and put parking along the way, because then people can get on and get on the trail, and then you're not making Forest Moore Park the recreational softball, baseball area, and then the trailhead too, that everybody parks there to go off, and all of a sudden you're very, critically short on parking. So. And then your famous development fees. These are the current fees listed in your current ordinance. $50 per plat, or for a preliminary plat, plus $3 per lot. Okay? I'm gonna take you through some of, I've got some, these are old. Here's the list, and I got Anna, Salina, and Melissa on this sheet. I got McKinney, Gunner, Prosper, and Sherman on the next sheet. And where for a residential preliminary plat, you charge $50 plus $3 a lot. Anna charges $325 plus $5 a lot. And then Salina charges $300 plus $15 a lot, and Melissa is that. So on a preliminary plat that would come in, and I'm using Driscoll Hill, which was the most recent one that came in, that we talked about, 142 lots, Van Alstyne's development fee or plat review fee for the preliminary plat would be $476. Anna's would be $1,035. Salina would be $2,430, and Melissa would be $2,380. And then when they go to final plat after they've done their construction and they come in and they're ready to start selling property, we ask for a final plat with all the easements, and that's the one that gets filed with the county. Van Alstyne would charge $162 for that plat. Anna would still charge $1,035. Salina would charge $1,820, and Melissa charges $3,140. So you are at $100. You are 10 times cheaper than your lowest competitor, basically, on that. And the staff time and the consulting time that you pay me to review those plats is basically being paid for out of your annual budgets, not the people who are creating the work. So by transferring that burden out to the people who are needing that work and raising your fees to at least be competitive. I'm not saying you don't have to, Elliot and Bill are kind of looking at me. But
I absolutely agree with
But, I mean, the doing that, and then the residential subdivision fees, Van Alstyne has 0. So I spent 10 or 12 hours myself on the Driscoll Hill plats. Bob spent 5 or 6, and Scott, you spent some time on it too. We didn't end up charging Van Alstyne for all that time because it's, we bust our budgets in a hurry. But Van Alstyne charged $0 extra to that developer to come in and have his plans reviewed to make sure they were copacetic with the ordinances and the design standards. If you look at it, Anna charges $2,500 for that type of review. Salina says you get charged cost, but we're going to take a $5,000 deposit and we'll refund you anything you don't, but don't expect a refund. Okay? And based on the hours that we spent on that, $2,000 to $3,000 probably would have been about the right number. So, I mean, just keep that in mind. See, McKinney would have been about $1,200 if they have a base fee plus an acreage fee. So when I calculated that out, theirs came out to about $1,200. So there's
Well, I worked some with this copy that you
Yeah.
gave us earlier, and it was real easy to go through and practice, just kind of triple everything that was on there, all of our fees, and fill in the blanks. But something that I couldn't take into account because I don't know is the number of man hours that you might spend on each of these,
Right.
and that should have something to do with that.
Yeah, Frank and Jennifer have asked me to put that together, so I'm in the process of doing that. But yeah, we're going to talk about the average time, like for an O'Reilly's and for a Driscoll Hill and for these little plats. We approved 3 or 4 plats. Yeah, we'll approve 3 plats. Those are a couple hours each. So we'll get an idea of what that cost is per review and consulting time, basically, and then, you know,
We just round up the big round numbers.
Frank,
That's what technically you're allowed to charge the city, is what your labor cost was. So, I mean, if he's gonna kind of show you what those are on average, then that's how you set your fees. And then if anybody ever comes and questions you, you can say, you know, we did this analysis. They probably aren't, it's such a small number to a developer, and they're going out and putting 200-300 lots, they're a couple $1,000 or something like that. But if you are ever questioned, you would have a backup
Right.
that you could show them.
Well, in Driscoll Hill, if I'm not Elliot, was it like 1.7 million is his construction cost?
Yep.
I think it's 1.7. So if you hit him up for a $2,500 review fee that, you know, cost the city, cost the existing, they're not even gonna pay attention to that. That's just, that's part of getting business done and getting into the city. So, although that sounds large compared to some of these numbers up on the board, to go through a 40 and 50 and 60 page set of plans that, has everything on it, it takes some time. Well, I don't know if you remember my set of notes back to them, but it was 19 pages long of comments. So, when you got a 19-page set of comments that are all single-spaced, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed, and a lot of things we need to catch.
And it is critical too, because as you've already seen, every city is different. And every city is different in the fees they charge and things like that, but they're also different in the requirements. And so it's really critical that we make sure that those are reviewed to be consistent with what Van Alstyne wants in the ground, and what Van Alstyne wants as far as street width and things like that. And so it's important, and the developers understand that too. And of course, for him, paying this money to get his plans reviewed is probably cheaper than him trying to go through the ordinance and
Yeah.
have people nitpick and go through all of the requirements. He'd have to pay his people to do that too, so it's probably a good deal for the developer as well.
And then you can see there's a bunch of blanks on the Van Alstyne side for a bunch of, like a site plan review, similar to a civil consulting plan review for a subdivision. There is no site plan review. Well, when O'Reilly's came in, and again, that's going to be part of, O'Reilly's and Golden Chick are kind of the two that are recent, that it took this much time. Here's the charge that we would expect now, and we will do the math to get it back to, is there a base charge plus an acreage, or, because obviously a subdivision that came in, like O'Reilly's would, if the back property behind it came in with the shopping center, that would take more time, but it would, maybe it's plus an acreage charge or a base, We'll go, again, that's getting down into the weeds. I want to keep you up. Just want the idea that, and hear from you that what this is, and we'll report back what we think the fees are averaging for that. Because like, again, right now, Jennifer has in the general budget, in her planning side, so much set aside for us to work on and do review for. And over the last 2 years, we would have run out of budget by January. But we keep stretching it. We find things to do for Steve in the utility budget that could be in the planning budget, so that's what we do. So.
But Gina brought up a good point. Salina, with them requiring a $5,000 deposit and you get refunded back, the remainder is, if you have a developer that's very conscientious, brings in a clean plat, doesn't require a whole lot of legwork as far as, things, everything adds up and the process is fairly streamlined. Well, they get quite a bit back because the process didn't take as long, as opposed to a developer that comes in, tries to do a lot of work themselves before they hand it over to the engineer, and the engineer doesn't really go over the ordinance with a fine-tooth comb, and it makes it where engineering is just a beat down for them, and they come out with a recommendation, but a fix-it sheet, and so they may eat up a bit of the 5,000. So that's there's kind of a mix and match as far as developers and what we're going to be getting. And so, the dollar for dollar and then getting the refund back if there is any remainder is probably a more fair process. Something to consider. Kelly, do you have any comments? I'm kind of watching you when I watch Larry, and so I see you,
I'm here to listen, Frank.
Yes, sir, I understand, but I mean, here, we do want input because we're trying to make sure that we're being conscientious, and we do want to make sure the
You're
development
doing a
is.
good job.
Sir?
You're doing a good job.
Thank you. The main thing with this is being fair about the process, not putting it back on the citizen, which I know I've reiterated this several times. When we are looking at this, we do want to be fair with the standards that we're going to follow. We do want to be competitive with the cities around us. So, that's the whole reason for taking into account the Plano, the Frisco, everything that Lynn and Bob have incorporated into the fees. I'm sorry I didn't print you all off another copy of that fee structure. We're not asking y'all to adopt that tonight. When I do talk to developers and they ask me what our current fee structure is and I send it to them, I do tell them, I give them the caveat, hey, this is only for a limited time because we are currently bringing back to council a revision on our fees. So that way, because these nickels and dimes do add up, because, if they're going out for millions of dollars on construction, these nickels and dimes do add up, and they want to know up front before they go to the bank and they partner for funding, what those costs are going to be. So I'm trying to be sure that when I talk to developers, that I am letting them know what we're working on, so that way it's not something that's a shock to them when they do get the funding, and all of a sudden they've got to foot the bill out of their own pocket for these additional costs. So that's something that we're trying to consider and make sure that we're communicating, because we do want developers to come in and be ready to go and think that they have, they're as informed as they possibly can.
Well, and I've been in a couple meetings when developers come in with you and they say, well, what's your impact fees, what's your street impact fees, what's your development fees? And Frank tells them, and they go, that's it? Yeah.
Some have done that, and then some do play a pretty good poker game and go, well, that's not even competitive. How do y'all expect to have any development come out here? And since we brought Lynn and Bob on, and I'm aware of what the fees are, I'll go, well, I'm sorry, but that's what we're trying to charge you. We're actually becoming more competitive. And they're like, well, I had to at least try. So, it's entertaining. And so we've got some pretty honest guys out there, and we've got some that want to come in and kind of see what can be done.
Every dime that you cost them.
It is. It's entertaining. It's entertaining at times. So the more you learn, it's interesting.
So-
I like the idea of deposit. 2 of the 3 plants we looked at the other night were just some guy in town who's got a big lot and wants to break off a quarter acre inside. He hadn't even made any money on it yet, and so asking him to put down 5K, he may only sell the lot for 10 or 12 days.
Sure.
Maybe some kind of hybrid model for those cases. We just come in with a very simple plan.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm thinking, for the heavy staff intensive stuff, that's probably where the deposit needs to be. We'll try to set that up. Steve, there's a couple of dogs running loose.
Don't do that. He's had a rough day.
So that gets us to what's going on right now. You've gotten the rewrite from Regina on the new ordinance and everything that it contains now. We are working with Steve on developing the public works, this what we call the city design manual. What we have here, hopefully tonight, we'll get some additional input from you, the P&Z, and the council on what other criteria we need to consider, either in the ordinance or in the city design manual. Now, the city design manual is going to be adopted by the ordinance, so it might be one and the same, because if you, we'll get into that in a bit. And then the development fees, like we've talked about, I'm working with Frank and Jennifer on setting what we think the right number is for that based on past history and how we're going forward. So that gets us to your homework. And all I want to do, I went through this weekend, this is the second time I've seen it, but just kind of go through and talk about what's new and make sure that what's new is what you want in your new ordinance, versus what's existing, and hopefully we can do this fairly quickly. Article 1 talks about the authority, the jurisdiction, and the definitions again. The only thing new in it is the city design manual. So, it references the city design manual, and that can be updated periodically with I think it's a 30-day notice to the development staff and all that other stuff. So you don't have to come in every time you want to change how a street light works or a screening wall works. If you stick it in the design manual, you get the 30-day notice that the city design manual is changing, and you don't have to go and rewrite your ordinance again or do an amendment to your ordinance.
On the city's design manual, the rest of it is, a copy of the current manual shall be kept on file and available for review at city manager's office and the city website. Would there be a notation on, at one time, that it would be somewhere else for people to know that it's on the website? Because not everybody always goes to the website.
Right. Well, yeah, there'd be,
What would that be?
well, at City Hall, there'd be, it would be, well.
It's a way for the public to know.
Right, well, and we would
It's
address
gonna
it,
be.
if
Would
you've
announce
been
it at
out,
the council meeting.
And it would be in the leader.
we could do that, and
Yes,
then also,
he does a pretty good job of following up on everything that we address at council.
So we assume it would be, and we don't have to put it in this.
Wouldn't the people that want to look at this still be people that were interested in developing?
yes,
I mean, like, there'll be a common ordinary citizen, they'll contact City Hall a number of times to be able to.
So what I'm gonna do is, might be, if you have a public hearing for this new ordinance about, then you could put in the announcement for the public hearing that, the general fund is gonna cover it, or whatever, and then there could be a reference there to this information will also be on the website. So it could be that notice as well.
and then if you remember about 6 months ago, if you go to the city clerk, P&Z site there's all new checklists on the website, which we put up about 6 months ago. The city design manual we would change those to reference the city design manual for, if you're doing this type of work, look, refer to the city design manual, and then we'll have a
PDF and search
yeah,
format.
we'll have a PDF, yeah, and then we'll have a hot link to it as well.
Yes.
We'll have a hot link to the city design manual if they want to get that, so. We'll just keep Dan Austin moving into the 21st century with that, so, but that, and that's part of it, and doing it. In administration, Article 2, again, here's where you've indicated that you would like to task P&Z with the final plat approvals. So that's the only change there.
Would they also be involved in the preliminary plan?
Yes. They would have final say in how, whether or not you create a consent agenda to where you acknowledge, either they send you a letter after their meeting saying, we approve this, this, and this. How they communicate to the council what was on their agenda is, kind of, that's to be determined, but, like Plano and McKinney, after the P&Z has made final recommendation on something, they put it on a consent agenda, so then basically it's, plat out here on Preston, so.
Okay, at that meeting when they do this, you would be there, or one of your group would be there presenting it to them or talking to them about it, or?
Well, if it's on a consent agenda, all items that are on a consent agenda, unless somebody wants to pull it off and talk about it, you would get the background, we'd probably, Jennifer would probably have to send you a copy of the plat.
I mean the planning zone, I'm talking about, would you be at their meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any kind of additional, do we need to start giving them some additional training, or is there classes that people can go to that are on planning and zoning to learn more about what their job would be?
We'll get to that in the future task, that's coming up.
Yes.
Okay,
We'll talk about that. But yeah, that's what it is. So, yeah, if in blue, yeah, again, the blue is the things that are new to your ordinance that you don't have, and the other things are. And then Article 3 right now, and Regina, we haven't talked yet, but right now, it gives final, P&Z final approval on plats and the new plat and filing fees. That's not where I wanted to bring that up.
And remember, it's ministerial. Once the council sets the subdivision ordinance, you've set up everything you require. So P&Z is going to be told by basically the staff and the engineers, yes, this plat, in our professional opinion, meets the council's ordinance. And then it's almost like a ministerial. In fact, the statute says, shall approve the plat if it meets the city ordinance.
Yeah.
So that's why most cities leave it up to their P&Z, I think, is because it's not like you're setting a specific use permit and you've got new, conditions and requirements and you're moving things around and changing things up. It's very different than zoning. Very different than zoning.
Yeah, because, and technically, P&Z couldn't even, if
Yeah, they can't make
it
changes
meets
either.
all the technical requirements of the ordinance on that plat, they have to approve it too. They don't, it's not a decision. If the concept doesn't meet, like if it's side street setback or something like that, we can get that revised. But if it technically meets all the requirements of the ordinance, there's no, they're basically administrative approval too. They don't really.
Let me comment on that real quick. 2, 3, 4 years ago, we'd see a plan and there'd be 10 things on it that would not be in compliance. And hopefully we caught all 10 of them, but maybe not. We'd send it back. The last 6 or 8 we've seen, they either came with a list of comments from them, who said, I noted these things, and the developer said, yep, I know they're working on it. Or they came to us and then said, you've already worked on it. Fixed it.
That's great.
The fact that they're working with city staff ahead of time and working through all those issues before it ever comes to P&Z makes it a whole lot easier.
And then Article 4 is a brand new section, which is an administrative plat, which only requires, and that would be for minor adjustments, movement of an easement, a scrivener's error, change in a call or something, something that doesn't change the intent of the plat, doesn't change the parameters of the plat, just changes some little error that slipped through. That you have indicated that you'd like the city manager to have the final approval on that. So when that comes in, that is a brand new level of detail. I would expect Frank to send those to me, and we'll review it for that and check it, and then send it back to him. But that's the kind of interaction that same as we're doing with plats and everything right now.
We're trying to have more communication with P&Z. I'm going to meetings, it's not, I think in the past, was it just, you took stuff to P&Z and P&Z had to catch it, Jennifer, or how does it work? Pretty much so. So you're putting a lot of responsibility and a lot of, I don't know about, well, maybe even liability on P&Z, where they're a volunteer board. So I go to P&Z with Jennifer, engineering comes, we help walk through it, we're trying to make sure that we're communicating with the developer and that everything's on up and honest. And that way we know exactly what P&Z's comments are back. We'll come in on a consent agenda for y'all to be aware of what's going on. You see it in your packet. If you have any questions, you want to come out and look at it prior to the meeting, we'll have them at City Hall. We can even, if y'all want to start seeing them on the easel for the consent agenda, before y'all come in, we'll start putting the developments on the easel. That way you and anybody who wants to take a look at it has the ability to look at it. Because I know even with P&Z, we're rolling stuff out. Everybody's walking up to look at it on the table. And, it's, at times, it's kind of like trying to feed puppies as far as everybody trying to get in to look at what they need to look at. So we can actually be a little more professional about it. But the main thing is we're trying to support P and Z does need to be trained. I mean, I don't know about Jim, he seems to have his stuff together. Well, and you've been on the board for a while, but the main thing is, we can all be more informed. I mean, the main thing I'm getting to is Leslie and her being comfortable in her role, but the main thing is, we are present, engineering is helping, engineering is there to address the comments, and we're not just leaving them out on an island where they may or may not be comfortable walking out the P&C with the decision that they make. So we're there. And I hopefully Jim feels better about, through the history of being on board, and Bob, feel better about how things are going and the decisions that we're making, especially with the way things are picking up. We want to make sure that we are all on the same page and making good decisions, so.
I have a question, but I don't know when to ask it. But that's
Go ahead.
Okay. I haven't found in here anything that covers inheritance, but say, I don't, but hypothetically, say I own a portion of land, and when I die, I will it to 3 different people. They don't know what they want to do with the land, but it has to be replanted. Where's that covered in here? I know it says
It only-
sold, but it doesn't say anything
It only
about-
needs to be replatted if they subdivide it. It'd still be one parcel of land. If they decide to split it up into the thirds,
But it's left in a will
right,
to 3, each section.
right.
Well, say it was lots, then. Say each lot was left to each person that they don't want. It can be a lot, or it could be further out in the TK, and it could be 25 acres each, or 50, or whatever, but they don't know what they want to do with it. They may not want to develop, or they may not be ready to live on it, or something.
Right.
So do they just replant it without a purpose, or?
Yeah,
I don't,
that would be,
what happens then?
we call that, there's a
I don't know where-
conveyance plat is what's covered under here. There's called conveyance plat, where all you're doing, you're not doing any improvements to the property, all you're doing is transferring the ownership.
Now, is that, but they play the same, they have a separate set of fees, right?
Yeah, they'll have a set of fees that come in, and it sets, and what it does is it'll take that one lot and cut it into the 3 lots, if that's, they all agree on how that was done. But it's a conveyance plat, which means there's no improvements being done or contemplated at this time, it's just a transfer of the property.
It's an inheritance.
Well,
There's no-
but the difference is, you can transfer property through warranty deeds and all that other stuff, raw parcels of land, without coming through for a plat. It's when you subdivide. So the need for you to go into 3 lots and divide it 3 ways, that creates a subdivision. So now you have to plat it. If you have your raw land, the 388 acres out around the college that you just zoned, and that was all one tract of land. They didn't subdivide it, that's why it was sold by warranty deed. It wasn't required to be platted. It was just 1 acre. It wasn't being developed. Now that it's coming in, now they're zoning it, and now they come in, when they do individual tracts now, they'll be able to individually plat.
But in the beginning, they did not have to.
They did not have to because they weren't proposing improvements and it was staying as 1 lot.
There is no requirement to plat land unless you're doing something with, you're either gonna develop something on it, or have to change the zoning, or you're gonna subdivide it. Otherwise, there's not a requirement explicitly that you have to plat property, even upon the change of ownership.
Even if you wanted to just build a house on it.
It's a single, that's a building permit you have right on that 1 tract. Now, if you're gonna build 2 houses on it, then you've created the need for a plat.
Okay. That answers it, thank you.
Sure. Was I correct in? I didn't say anything out of line on that?
No, I mean, just, a lot of times those are even, the administrative plat, that's allowed by statute. Can you read that part? Under page 14. I mean, 4 or fewer lots, not over 40 acres, frontage on the, you know, things like that might actually apply to them as well.
Yeah.
So, and that would be just by the city.
And I read that, but I wasn't sure about the other.
Depends on your acreage.
Yeah, if the will says good old Joe gets the northern 10 acres and Bill gets the southern 10 acres, who's the county going to send the tax bill to?
Well,
But then
That's
that-
Right.
You got to move on, if he says,
that's
let's
what,
subdivide it before you put it.
well, and then, once you try to divide it into 2 or more parts, that's when,
That's where I was.
that's where we come back at you with this ordinance and say, okay, if you're gonna make it more than one piece of property, this is when, now you're in our court, now this is how we've gotta do it.
So they would know that by reading this.
Yes. Yeah, there's a clause,
You don't have to look it up, I don't think.
but there, right at the very beginning, there's it says,
Well, I got the 40 acre thing,
yeah, well, no, yeah, this is right at the very beginning. It talks
but
about,
it says so. Underlined.
At the beginning of Article 4, or at the beginning of the ordinance?
I don't know. But it is in there, Mayor, that says if you're taking a raw property and you're subdividing it into 2 or more lots, I think is what then at that point, you are under these guidelines. Okay, yeah, top of page 10, right?
Yeah.
The subdivision plat required. Every owner of a tract of land who divides a tract into 2 or more lots agrees. So that's kind of the tipping point to where, okay, now you're under the guide, you fall under the guidance of the subdivision ordinance.
Even though it's just for the purpose of transfer of ownership.
Right. Well, now, only if you're subdividing into 2 or more lots. If you're just transferring ownership from owner to owner, that doesn't matter, if it stays one homogeneous lot, that doesn't, we really don't have a say. We'd like to have that plat. That would,
Multiple people can own one piece of property.
Right.
If they don't fight, they can share it.
it's just, once they divide it into 2 or more lots, it's once they split it, that's when it comes under this purview.
Or both of them bills.
Or both of them build something. Right. Because and both of them build something, then you've got to split it for Grayson County.
But you can't have 2 homes on one lot, is
Yeah, right.
what they told me is the new rules. So that's when you would come in.
That's when
Really
you-
4, but they have a lot line between them. And then you have setbacks and everything else.
You just have to divide up the acreage.
Right.
Okay, the administrative plat, like I said, that'd be that's limited under Frank's purview at that point. The preliminary plat, right now it's valid, you come in with a big subdivision, usually the only things that preliminary plat are big subdivisions. They come in, preliminary plat, right now they're good for 12 months, and then there's a clause that allows the 12-month extension. For, if they don't get their financing together or they're out shopping it for that first 12 months. And Georgetown Village, number 2, just filed that last month with you. They filed their 12-month extension. And I don't know, Frank, if you wanted to share that with them today or not, but I got a call from their engineer. The developer who preliminary platted it has sold it to a home builder. And the home builder is planning to have that subdivision in some form to us in the next month. So I don't know if it's going to be all 162 lots, but I want some guidance here. Right now they have preliminary platted 60-foot lots. their house pad is 50 feet, but they have a 6-foot minimum required side yard. So they're gonna come back in with a final plat on 62-foot lots, so they're gonna lose some lots along the way, but the general configuration of the streets and everything is gonna be the same. So they wanted me to ask the question, do they need to re-preliminary plat for that extra 2 feet of frontage? Or do they need to go for a variance to the PD? And I told them, don't go for the variance to the PD, that's a public hearing and all that other stuff. And just your guy, if all they're doing is changing 2 feet of the lot width and it's to the good, and they comply with the general street layout, I've got it with me if you want to see it later. I would say the preliminary plat's still good. You know, we'll get into the details going forward from this point. I mean, I haven't asked Frank that yet. You know, just kind of,
A single home building company owns it.
yeah. They're currently building in McKinney, Melissa, and Sherman. It's called Stone Hollow Homes. I got the call from the engineer because he wanted the information from the Driscoll Hill people, so because he's got to coordinate survey and water and sewer lines and all that other stuff. So. I hadn't had a chance to talk to you about that either. You told me you'd sell it.
There's two schools of thought as far as whether we just go ahead and allow them the full final plan, or if we go back and want them to revise the PD. If we do that, then we can actually throw some things in, like the 912 roof, square footage, things like that. However, if they don't agree to it, then backs up the timeline and we may not see the homes from the ground. So really it's what do y'all want me to tell them? And I would prefer we move forward in good faith on the final plat, and the current PD rules are in place. But I haven't seen the elevations on what they're proposing as far as doing. That's what I kind of want to look at before we give an answer. But with public hearings, if they're wanting to start moving dirt and start putting all the infrastructure in and get going, coming back to the public hearings and everything with PD revisions, it does give us an opportunity to say what we want. However, we really need to move forward. That's been sitting there for
Good indication that they're not trying to go cheap, but they're trying to expand their lots.
that's the good thing about it, so.
And remember, a preliminary plat is a general layout. It's a conceptual. Yes, it's exact in its dimensions and things like that, but it's a general layout on how the lots will work and how the streets will work. Adding 2 feet to each lot so they don't have to come in for a variance on the side yard setbacks.
Legal's reminding we don't need to get too far into this.
Yeah.
That's just an example of, a plating issue.
So I'm not looking for y'all to make a decision.
Yes.
But Russell's comments right on. It's, I'm sorry, I asked y'all what y'all want to do. My fault. They need to move forward. And the indicator is them wanting to have a bigger footprint on the structure. Okay? So, sorry.
Well, it's just an example of, that's the whole idea about the plats. When you guys go to set these plats, and you set setbacks, and there's a lot. That's why you do these objectives, and then the staff's going to come in and follow your objectives in their day-to-day, for the engineers and the staff. So that's why this is so important.
So right now, the way it's written right now, there is no extension of that extra 12 months. So we'll get in a couple slides later. We'll talk about some other timelines that are good. It's good for, and they're a little different. We need to talk about why those are. Again, the final plat, again, the 30-day window on it must be approved. I don't know that the PD has a license agreement right now on Georgetown or not. The license agreement might be a new concept, but basically what a license agreement is doing is setting up if you approve a PD or a neighborhood that's got public areas that it's got to maintain, it's setting up the minimum requirements of that HOA, that they can assess their properties, that they, and there's about 10 or 12 little bullets in here of what they're required to do in setting up. But a license agreement, as far as I know, is not anything that the city has used in the past. They use the PD as their license agreement because it's set up those clauses that would do that. So this is another legal issue that.
Yeah, it's just, that comes from other cities that do that, and basically would be on the plat, and it gives everybody in the subdivision notice that there is this agreement, and the HOA is required to do it, and, we would even have them come in and show us their HOA documents, and say, yeah, we got an HOA, so we know that this stuff's gonna be maintained, and it's not gonna fall back on the city to maintain things. And so it kind of gives everybody notice, and then we get to see that you set up your HOA. It's all gonna run great in the future.
So this gives us the to make
Right,
sure
it
they enforce
requires
the
that, because you don't
HOA.
wanna, yeah,
Sometimes you got the
someday we'll
HOA
set up that
that doesn't work.
HOA. And it's, no, you're gonna set it up and get it going. They're gonna maintain these common areas, because common areas look great on the plat. Everybody wants all those common areas, but we don't wanna have to go in later either and try to decide who's maintaining all that stuff. And it's not really a city park, but, they want city to maintain it, you'll get pressure from your citizens then. So if you put as an HOA maintains this, and you can spell all that out early on and avoid problems later.
Is that the problem that Plano encountered with having to have $1 million in your budget for all of those screen walls?
Yep. Yep.
Not clearly defined.
Yep.
So Plano's fixing them for an HOA or something.
But they would have had a licensing, well, you remember Plano is also an alley city too. So half of those screening walls have an alley behind them, so it's city right of way next to city right of way. And they own the screen in between. So, it was dedicated to the city. So,
So the city has to maintain it.
Yeah, the city
Once
has
it's
to maintain
dedicated
it
to
at
you,
that
you
point,
have to.
yeah. After they're built and they're approved, and then the warranty period of maintenance bond goes away, then it becomes city property. So that's how Plano's.
Why isn't that one here?
Huh?
Georgetown, why?
You don't have that?
We do have
Yeah, we got
alleys.
Well, you got
Well, I mean,
it.
they have alleys, a fence, a thing, and the HOA was the ones that take care of it.
We have
Well,
that
it was written in the PD that way, in the HOA, that when you do a PD, you basically are creating a license agreement, in my terms.
Okay.
Why? Because you are granting special exceptions or enhancements to base zoning by putting a PD on it and pulling in the HOA and all that other stuff, so.
If they come in and just zone it and don't do a PD, and we don't have to go through the rigmarole of deciding all the elements, we would like to see that licensing factor in every piece of subdivision zoning. That way it's clear whether they do PD and establish HOA through PD, or if they don't, still it sets the criteria for what's the city gonna do, and how to keep, and what is the HOA gonna establish.
Yeah, this is for all that peripheral stuff that, like I said, looks great on paper. Those green spaces with the trees and the parks and all that. But once they sit out there for 10 years and they're grown up in weeds and some
Well,
of them.
does that mean, if that was the planned development in Georgetown, did Georgetown, are they in non-compliance with their PD when they went back with a metal fence instead of a masonry screen fence?
I've been along Village Parkway. Did they?
Yeah.
Because all of that fence started falling down and it got replaced with metal fence.
Well, part of it is the brick part got replaced with metal fence.
That's
There was
what
some
I'm
metal fence there.
Very small.
No, a fourth of it was, or a third of it was.
Go back to
looking
We'll
at
have to
that.
look,
It's
we'll
like
have to look
you
at the
look
PD ordinance. Yeah, The PD ordinance govern over all of it, so.
It's how it's defined to
Ken,
be.
if the fence was beginning to fall down, was that the citizen's responsibility to tell me how to fix it?
It could be.
If they don't,
Good enough,
I mean, it's,
like your,
But like I said, the big thing about this.
Yeah, I know it is.
The big thing, if you look on page 22, these are things that would be listed on the plat. And I know it looks like a lot of stuff, and some of y'all have seen plats that just have like lots of language on them, and it's really little. You need stronger glasses than these, but these are my little glasses. But basically, it would spell out that on the plat, you know, there is a homeowners association. You will have the authority to collect membership fees, and you are responsible for the maintenance of all common areas and screen walls. I mean, that's something y'all need to decide, and do you want that on the plat? I mean, this is when, like we're talking about, these are your objective standards. That's something you need to decide before you pass this ordinance, is if you want that. Because that's would transfer that responsibility, you know, it's very clear that that's what they're responsible for. That's what you want. That's how I wrote it.
That's how it should be.
Okay.
And that's just a discussion, so you aren't deciding anything. It's
Right, but think about it.
answering questions and seeing how far things go as far as how comfortable are you with what's been written. And if you haven't had time to digest it, perfectly understandable, we can set up another workshop. It's just the main thing is getting the discussion going on the information. that's provided.
Okay, and then another thing on the final plat that's brought up here is visibility triangles. That hasn't been an issue here yet, but once you get 6-lane divided thoroughfares and 40 mile an hour and 50 mile an hour traffic coming down, when you get to those angles and, you know, you'll see it several in Plano and Frisco and McKinney, is those front entryways are pulled back a little bit, and if you have alleys, they're pulled back a little bit, so there's a engineering technical requirement for how far down you have to be able to see the roadway based on the speed limit. So you create a site, what we call a visibility triangle, that basically acts as an easement that pulls back any vertical obstruction that would block the driver's view. So
In the old part of town, we already have visibility problems, but we will try to prevent it in future development.
Right. So, yeah, right now, you currently don't have anything like that, but, you know, that would be, and for me, you know, seeing when roadways curve a certain way and you have entryways at that point, you've seen it where you have visibility issues, either vertical or horizontal. That's where you want to make sure that you don't have those blind spots, because once you start having those accidents, that requires.
Well, and the other thing is, if you don't put that visibility triangle in there, they will build their lots out to the corner. So that hard corner is going to be a house. It's not going to be a soft look of a landscape corner. Plus, if that road ever expands and you need to condemn that corner to put in a right turn lane, you're going to be condemning a landscape corner and not a house.
I think the HOA out there already, like our neighborhood already has that visibility thing.
They've incorporated some of that too, but there were no, but if you look at the plat, there were no.
It makes the entryways look so much bigger. It's this thing.
And it's really, it's 100% visibility or 100% safety issue.
Right.
There's no, I mean, there's no reason to pull back a fence and make it look cool or anything like that. It's a safety issue, period. And then on the replat, again, this is the unity agreement amongst multi-owner tracts. That's the shopping centers with multi-tenants that own parts of the building. You're now requiring them to all participate in the replat. It's not, it's a legal requirement to make sure that you've got all the property owners that have a say-so on that are there.
So on replats versus administrative plats, I would think we could have called that plat we did over here on the north side of town a replat, because it's an existing lot, and we're replatting it to make it into 2 lots. But yet, that doesn't seem to be what this implies.
See, that's an actual hard subdivision, they're having to set up, they had to give right of way, and then they also had to reestablish their front building lines.
Yep.
So I don't know that that would have been a replat, because it's 1 lot into 2. Administrative plat, according to the definition, is a scrivener's error or an error by the surveyor on a bearing or a distance or identification of an easement, and all you do is clarify and stuff. On administrative plat, we're not changing the structure of the existing lot, we're just changing how it's, something that was read or something that was put on it.
Yeah, okay. I read it a little differently. I'll go back and.
Well, I mean, Regina, you're the one that wrote
Well, I'm
it.
trying to find the admin part, because you're asking, would it be an admin plan?
Yeah, Article 4, yeah. It sounds like if you're doing.
I'm not, to be honest, I'm not familiar, I didn't see that plat, so I don't,
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to
was
comment on.
this?
Yeah, it was just the standard 1 block of property. The top half was already split into 3 lots. The bottom half was 1 big lot, and they divided it in half to make 2 single-family 1 lots out of it. Now, Lynn's right, they also, at that point, had to go in and do,
Well, yeah, they dedicated right away.
Right away on the street.
Yeah, once you start dedicating right
Yeah,
away, you
this
get,
says, admin says every lot is able to be established without the need for creation of new street or extension of municipal facilities.
No new street. no new
well, but
facilities.
you need to do right away to meet your,
Right, but it, there's a paragraph in there that says each lot created by the admin plat is in accordance with all requirements, and with the requirements of the Wayne City managers. The next paragraph, last one in section 1, dedication of street or alley right of way, if applicable, occurs in accordance with the transportation plan. So it seems to allow dedication as long as it's.
Was it 4 or fewer lots?
Yes, ma'am.
Might be,
it could,
like I said, I haven't seen it, but
Okay.
it sounds like it has a possibility to be.
it could, you know, I guess, based on that, it could.
But I mean, this is new, you don't have that, you don't have that in now, right? Right, you don't have it now.
So that's what my question was. I have difficulty distinguishing between a replat and an admin plat.
In the new one, you mean?
Yes, ma'am.
In the new one, okay.
Yep. And there's probably just something there I'm missing.
And it says on an existing paved street, what if it's not a paved street, it's a street not?
Street's pretty gravel.
If it's got gravel, it's paved.
Yep.
That's all weather.
It's improved.
It's improved, yes. it's
Hard to
improved.
believe that's paved.
You talking down
Dirt,
Dallas
but
Street?
not much. Yes.
Or Preston at the moment. I'm just using that as an example to point out I have difficulty distinguishing between those 2 points.
Administrative would be,
I think I understand that. I guess my problem is
The
with the replat.
Well,
I guess I think of replats, and this isn't the old thing, but a lot of times it's like, like you said, you're moving lot lines.
Okay?
So you had, that's one reason is you're moving, you know, you sell it off and he wants a bigger lot, you're moving. Changing easements, because a lot of times, you know, you lay in the easement, right? And once you lay in an easement, it becomes city property. And they'll say, you know what, we want our footprint over there, we need to move that easement. So when you start moving those easements, we as staff need to look at the value of that easement. We can kind of trade out easements if the money is similar, like, right, you said?
Yeah.
So, you know, the moving of the easements, things like that would be replats. Because I guess how I usually think of replats.
I think administrative is, there's no significant change
Yeah,
in the
it's
lot.
pretty small.
For, you know, unless you're just cutting them up.
Yep.
And then replat being that you've got to move, you know, like the commercial one out there where we got rid of the lot line.
Yep.
That's a replat because it was 2 lots and now we're getting rid of a lot line and making it 1. So that's not, that's not, you know,
You want that at a higher level. I mean, You don't want that to be an admin, you want that to come through PZ.
I think
Especially, like I
there's-
said,
And there might be some fuzzy,
There may be some overlap between those definitions.
I guess I wonder, again, my thought process on administrative, and I haven't read the ordinance, but to me, administrative is you're basically correcting something as opposed to creating something. That's
It's a little
except it says 4 lots.
it's a little broader than that. And by the way, the admin plat part is like it says, it's under section 212.065. It's set out by statute, like when you're allowed to do this administratively.
Okay,
So I followed that,
okay.
so.
If somebody came to me and said, here's what I've got, is that administrative or replat? I'm not sure I could answer the question
Okay.
based on what I read.
Okay. We can go back and look at that.
Okay, thanks. He had a comment in here, or perhaps you did, about in the final plat section about combo plats. We seldom if ever do them, and maybe we don't need that anymore now that we have admin and for replat.
Right, you have them, and, right, and I've never, you already have them?
It's in
I
the
never
current
heard of
ordinance,
them, I
right.
never heard of them. And it's not really listed out in the statute, I wasn't even sure what it was. And Julie told me that, I asked her if I remember right, she's like, I think she's in 5 years, she doesn't remember y'all ever doing one.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think most people, most applicants know it's an option. It would be a simple thing. It's like, why do I have to give you a prelim and a final? I'm just cutting this lot in half. And so the combo would apply. But now with this new ordinance, I think the admin applies.
right, so a lot of people can just go through that step.
Yeah. So I'm thinking what I read, I'm fine with the limiting the combo class.
Well, and if we, if we do that, we can figure out where that, that line can move. It's a little fuzzy right now, so we've got some broad guidelines, but we can.
Yeah.
And if the P and Z wants to see more of the administrative plats, then we can narrow that scope a little bit.
Right, I mean, is that kind of, would you like to see more of that in?
Not necessarily. I just want to be able to answer somebody's
Sure,
question
okay.
when you say, is this admin or is this replat?
Right.
I'm not sure I'd give them the right answer.
Okay, and then miscellaneous plats and abandonments. Again, this is city manager approval. It's giving the city manager approval on abandonments. And Regina, I'm sure of that, because typically the city council, if the city's given
It should be that we're,
in Article 8 at the top. It says that the city manager can approve, at least that's what I read, so, and typically on an abandonment given back right away, that's a city council action that the city manager can approve, or the P and Z, that's gonna be council. So, because there's a procedure for if you abandon the street, for example, you have to offer it to the adjacent property owners.
Right.
At the,
Well, right, so that's
at
statute.
appraised value, and then they can buy it back from the city and do, but that, to me, that's a council. Again, you haven't seen my edits yet, so.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You're seeing them for the first
right,
time,
off
so.
guard, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, and I got a couple more coming, so.
Okay.
So don't, I just,
Okay.
these are things that I saw when I was reading it over the weekend that I probably need to look into and clarify.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the existing one is the city council is the final, they're the ones giving the city property back to the requesting adjacent property owner. So that's a council function. That's not, at least, I don't know by state law, but every city I've been around, that's a council function, so. Plan developments and mixed developments. Now this is asking for, it's valid for 18 months, and I don't know why we changed the length here, because currently it's 12 months with a 12-month extension, kind of like the preliminary plat. And here we just have an 18-month timeframe for the PD, or for the PD to come in and do something. And
It's a lot more elaborate than a preliminary plat.
right, well, I understand that, but the extension period, the time period to vest it, and there is no allowance for an extension.
I don't know how y'all feel about extensions. I mean, some people just kind of worry that it's, you're putting a lot of pressure on the city, if it's a city manager who extends it, you're putting a lot of pressure on them to make that decision when you could just say it's X months and it gets them, you gotta go do it, go build, don't just kind of bank on the fact you can keep asking for the extension. You go back and look at some of these vested right cases, these old cases, they talk about somebody filed a preliminary plat and then they didn't do anything for 20, 30 years. Well, then they want all the old ordinances and everything to apply to them, and they've sat around not doing anything for 30 years. So most places have,
Right.
these specific time limits. There's no arguing about when that expires. It's X. And you don't get into, it was his subjective opinion. He let, mine be extended and not his. I would recommend you just set
Well, right.
when something expires.
And the current one is 24 months.
Okay, so you can pick whatever you like.
Even with an extension, you get 12 months and then you get you can get up to another 12-month
Okay.
extension. So that's the
Does
current.
it say only one extension?
Yes, it only says one extension. So,
Yeah, just pick a number and, I think.
Yeah, well, and that's why I just want to bring, this one has 18 with no extension. The current requirement is 12 with a 12. So, and that would match, that would be consistent with a preliminary plat, although they are totally different in what they are. But it sets kind of a consistency. Engineers like consistency, so.
Well, I know, I'm just saying, I think that the difference is a PD is a lot more complicated. You got a lot more going on
Yeah.
than just filing a preliminary plat.
Right, I agree.
So I would say it should be longer.
Okay, and then,
Either, if you want to keep your 24, like 24 months or 18, 24 months, but,
It would be the same, that it would all be one instead of an extension.
right, that's what I'm saying, if you just set it at 24, you could consider doing the 12 plus 12 that you have now, you could just do 24.
So just to be clear, what has to happen in that 18 or 24 months? They have to, the developer has to...
they have to bring in development plans. They have to bring in the first set of development, they have to begin.
Engineer plans and-
Yeah, they have to prepare plans and submit them for approval in that first one. Or otherwise, that PD is back at, you got to go back at zoning.
Yep.
And, and you're back at the zoning level to determine what you got to do with it.
Right, and it talks about vesting even. It says, once the approved final plat has been recorded, because that's when you vest, is you record that final plat, then it's deemed as vested and does not require extensions. So that's kind of actually the caveat to that number altogether is, once it's set and recorded, in months really that's the ordinances they're going to follow is what happened on that day.
What's more common?
Much? But, do y'all have PDs that come in and just file and get their zoning, their PD, and then they don't file any plats?
Typically, the way this is set up, they would have to do a preliminary plat, and then once they did construction, then we get the final plat.
Right, I think some places have where somebody will come in and just file a big PD, and try to, anchor down this huge amount of land, and then they don't file any preliminary plat, they don't move forward.
Right.
But I don't know, you all might not have that problem. You don't want to have it, okay. Because I don't, it kind of depends on what you've been seeing too.
Yeah. So, and then to Article X, or Article 10, it refers to a stormwater and flood prevention ordinance, which there currently isn't one, which I might propose that all the drainage criteria go into the city design manual. whether or not an ordinance, well, and the penalties are appropriate and whatever. Because we're not, the city design manual is not going to allow them to build in a floodplain. It's not going to allow them to raise the water surface. It's going to do all the technical things that, the city design manual will do all the technical things that the ordinance would put out there. But whether or not, and Regina, I'd leave that up to you, whether or not we actually need a stormwater and flood prevention ordinance, or if we can refer to the standards, which would have those same requirements.
Do you have standards adopted by ordinance?
Well, it would be the city design manual. The city design manual on the drainage section will have how you handle floodplains, how you handle flood prevention. That's all incorporated in the.
Well, once you adopt the whole thing by ordinance, though, it's going to become your.
Right,
ordinance.
you're right.
You don't have one, right?
We do not have one right
So
now.
you need to,
Yeah.
so that'll be in this process.
Right. Another thing that's talked about is block length. Says maximum of 1,200 and things like that. There are none currently in the existing ordinance, and I'm proposing that also be part of city design manual. I'd rather control the streets.
And you understand, that's just for good general development, so you don't have those 15-foot long, there's no break, there's no alley, you know, a fire truck. I mean, you have to think of, you know, safety to that.
Right.
A lot of places have where if it's, you know, too long, you know, you have to get, you know, some kind of variance from that. So you just gotta kind of think about blocking is basically what we're doing.
Yeah, a lot of this 10 is where a lot of my comments are going to come in. You haven't seen them yet, so
Yeah,
don't be surprised.
Okay.
On lots, there is no double frontage criteria like there is in the existing ordinance, which really needs to stay, which means that you can't have two front door lots. I mean, you can't be fronting on one street and fronting on another street. And without a screening wall or an alley between one of those sides that creates a rear yard. And it's pretty clear in the existing subdivision ordinance. The new one is a little fuzzy, and I'd like a lot sharper, because we've had a lot of, well, I mean, the one we're dealing with out in rural Calhoun County has got double side, I mean, they've got three sides of their lots have streets on it. And how do you, what's the front, you know, is it front?
Where's the front setback?
Where's the front setback? Where's the side yard setbacks? And it becomes, so double lot frontage, it's something that we need to talk about, because there's been a couple subdivisions that come in and have done that and then put another street right behind, so you got a street and a street on either side of the house, which is not good planning or safe even. So, and the alley is okay, but that's a lower speed, smaller facility. But having two streets where they have frontage on both blocks is not typically accepted.
I don't like alleys. I don't like alleys.
Well, we're getting to those, so. You read the next bullet says, this ordinance says, alleys shall be required.
And that's just a question, now, do you like alleys, you know, that's either in one.
One thing I don't like about them is entryway to the house off of the house.
Is what?
Entryway to the carport off the alley. It's on the exit to their carport is off alleys.
Okay. Well, I mean, typically if you have an alley, you're going to have a rear entry garage. So,
But I mean, the ones I'm talking about, they have no front entry at all.
right. Well, that's the whole purpose for an alley, is to eliminate a front
I
entry.
don't like it for maintenance.
They have a front,
They have a front door, but no front entryway from vehicles.
Right. Well, yes.
right, you park on the street or you have a circle drive.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, if that's the case, I think if it's a planned development, that should be theirs, but for the city having it, we either have to have it paved and then have to have drainage, and none of the alleyways that has this has drainage, or there's no pavement. And the utilities are very, very shallow, so there's no way like that. And the shrubbery is barely 10 foot wide, so the shrubbery that's crowding the house.
Well, in this case too, I mean, Plano, Richardson, Frisco got away from it, but Plano and Richardson are all rear entry. You know, like I said, I've lived there for 30 years and I hate it because the only way I ever see my neighbors is if we happen to pull into the driveways in the back. I never see them out front. You know, you don't have that, you know, but that's alley, but you know, the whole idea of an alley is it is rear entry. It takes the garage and the parking of the cars off of the front yard setback, so when you're driving down the street, you just see.
So we're gonna put the utilities in the street, so I don't have to pick up that.
Right, yeah, well, and in the design manual, we're putting the utilities in the streets, and then the private utilities, the gas and the electric and the cable, they all go in the back with an alley.
But you can put in the design manual the issues that these guys were
Oh, yeah.
in the problems with maintenance, because we can't do away with alleys whenever 99% of your high-end subdivisions want rear entry.
Rear entry, that's correct, that's correct. So, yeah, and the thing here is, this says shall be required. Now, there are some caveats. It says P&Z can grant waivers based on physical hardship, locational criteria. It's, you know, next to a floodplain. It does make sense. It's giving the P&Z the right to waive the requirement for alleys,
But not just because they don't want to.
but not just.
You can go through, I mean, a lot of times, I've been in other cities, and you can go through the PD process. And, you know, you'll lay it out where they have front entry. And, you know, maybe you put in, you want those fancy wood garage doors. You know, that is an acceptable front garage. But otherwise, we require back alley garages. So, I mean, you can kind of decide when you're gonna let someone do a front
That would go
entry
through
product.
P&Z?
And, yeah, we go through a PD, basically. That goes, and a PD goes, you know, plan development goes through P&Z and council. So council would see those when they want to do a front
Georgetown
entry.
Heights, the reason they don't have alleys is because they went through a PD. Got approved that way, even though our ordinances.
We don't have one.
So we don't have to stay.
Not anymore.
Okay, I thought you just said that we're required right now,
No,
all alleys.
no.
Okay.
No, in this draft.
How
it
about,
says-
Okay.
have you ever seen one where everybody has to have a side entrance?
The swing
That's
garage.
that's usually in zoning. That's a zoning.
There's a housing addition over by, Fort Worth that's that way. So everybody has, you know, 60 feet between their houses, because they gotta have a place. They have a driveway off the front, they all have to go into the driveway.
Subdivision, I live inside.
Is it? Okay.
No alleys, but the garage faces street.
Okay.
There's a new addition, there's a new addition in Fairview, and all of the garages are on the front. Every garage door in that addition is the same.
Right.
The houses are different, but every
Is it those
garage door.
fancy wood ones?
Yes.
Very
They have all
expensive,
have that.
very expensive. They look very nice, but they're very expensive.
But they all have the same garage door,
But,
no matter what your house looks like.
That would be probably the zoning.
That's a PD, that's what I'm
That's a
saying.
PD and a
What
zoning
you can
issue.
do
That's
is you can put in that says alleys are required, and then the PD can change that. And then you would look at it, and they would bring in their house, you know, their sketches, and show you, this is what the front of the house would look like. And you can decide if you, that's
You're
an
saying
exception.
that would have to go through P&Z and.
Right, because it's a PD, it's a zoning issue.
It's a new ordinance.
One of the things we have with our alley now, some of them, not necessarily working, but the roads, the trash trucks tear them up real bad, the alleys. And we have one that has alleys, but there's no outlets.
Well, when you do
So
that,
you need
that's gonna be-
that outlet. that
right,
alley's
that's gonna be his job when he does your design manual, you know, to draw out the alleys sufficient for your trash trucks. You know, including if you need the visibility triangles, if you need how much ever, you know, depth you need to make, you know, so the trash truck doesn't tear it up. I mean, that's all things you can prevent by these good standards in the beginning. So you get away from those problems in the future.
But, yeah, whether or not alleys are kind of a standard, and then if they want to change that, if they come in with a PD and they want to do side entry or some front entry, a PD is a zoning case, so that's recommendation out of P and Z, but it ultimately ends up at the council. The council has final say on all the zoning. So that, you know, so that hierarchy isn't changing because they're just, they'll take a look at it, make a recommendation to you based on it.
Does it say any place in there that alley must be submitted?
That's going to be part of the
Okay.
design manual.
Okay.
Well, I'm assuming that we're going with concrete
Okay.
on future pavement going forward.
Yes.
So,
But just to be clear, our current subdivision ordinance requires alleys.
That's
Oh,
what I
it
was
does?
thinking.
You have it right now?
It does. However, I think there's a clause in there that says if the city, if it's okay with the city, they don't have to. For no apparent reason, they just, we all agree.
That's kind of broad.
Yeah,
It's a rule that you have to do unless you decide you don't want to.
well, if both parties agree
Oh, okay.
that we don't want.
Would that be a PD then? Is that what it is?
well, no, well, here it is. It's 8.6 of the, 8.6. Alleys shall be required along the rear line of all lots to be used in residential, commercial, and industrial districts, except that the city council may waive this requirement where other definite and assured provisions is made for surface access, such as off-site loading, unloading, and parking is consistent. So it was
Yes,
It was
the council must
required,
decide.
but when you approved a plat that didn't have rear entry,
Yep,
you said, that's okay.
okay.
Here, this kind of creates a little, make sure that,
Yeah.
you want to make sure that that is your intention.
Right, so the way this is written now, it is required and you've got to have a dang good reason why you can't, having something to do with
Right.
geography, some other hardship
Well-
that does not apply to the next guy who comes in and puts in it.
If that's the case, then Bristol Hill, does we give them permission to, I assume not on the alleys?
Yes, sir, that's a previously acquired subdivision.
I mean, that was one that we, who gave them permission?
Yeah, it was in 02, that was in
It might be
02.
before that.
Oh, it was that long ago?
It was a long,
Okay.
Well, and you know, the way they sided up all their lots back up to the drainage easement, so it would have been extremely difficult to put the alleys down in the floodways down there. So,
No, you could roll the boat in there.
how's everybody doing? Is everybody
yeah, we are.
okay?
Ice cream?
What's that?
Feeling a little wrong.
Where are we?
We are-
What's the stopping point then?
Well, we are about, I think about 5 slides from the end, so,
Okay.
maybe 6, or maybe.
Anyway, this was one of my big discussion points. I think we got, again, it was 10 years ago, we got a lot of pushback from developers 10 years ago. The guys who did Georgetown, the southern half, were okay with alleys, but we hear from a lot of developers, they say it's a huge cost for us to go and put in an extra concrete. I'm sure you want us to do it, we're gonna skip somewhere else. From a city's point of view, I think that's something we need to decide.
Yeah, they had that
The police
option.
department probably has an opinion on whether alleys are a safety issue. And I like the wording the way we have it, frankly. It says alleys are a good thing and we want them,
Yeah.
but we can mutually agree not to do it.
You have to give us a good reason why not. Even if it's prettier, better, whatever, you have to give a reason and then get the council to approve.
And I get a consensus from PD, from Chief Barnes, and see what their call volume has been, and, some of these residences that have an alley versus ones that don't.
Criminal activity.
So,
Criminal activity.
yes, ma'am. What are some of the bigger points?
Okay, yeah, that's, cross drainage on lots, sidewalks, requires sidewalks on all streets except the freeway districts and the industrial districts. You gotta have them along the freeway, there's no place to walk until the frontage roads are developed. You gotta have them on freeways, so I would raise a question there. Industrial districts, there's not that much foot traffic out there, but, I'd question that.
What do we have that's a freeway district?
Hmm?
What do we have?
Everything along the highway, everything along the 75.
On 75? No,
Yeah.
I mean, not Wakefield, that's on,
No,
just everything on 75.
yeah, everything that's 60 miles an hour or greater.
Okay.
Isn't there a certain amount of state requirements for essentially handicap accessibility routes throughout these?
Well, and as you build, 75 going forward, you're gonna need that accessibility at that point. And then once they put in the ultimate frontage roads, everybody's putting in, most Plano, Richardson, Allen never had sidewalks along the frontage roads until they got the ultimate frontage roads, the ultimate cross-section built. At that point, they needed them because nobody could get between lots when they had shared parking. So,
And some of this is going to bleed over. I mean, we're going to come back and look at the land use plan. We're trying to address what's most in our face in the subdivision development. But when we come back and look at the master use plan, we'll start working on that. I hope we don't have subdivisions built all the way out to 75. I mean, we want to leave that retail, commercial corridor. We do want to have sidewalks, we want accessibility up and down the frontage. But the main thing is I hope we don't build all the way out, because that really restricts our ability to have the amenities and conveniences that we need now.
So logically, should a place like Golden Chick be required to put in sidewalks?
Typically,
yeah, when they build their culvert over the drainage and tie it in, there'd be a sidewalk on that would tie into the sidewalk there, and then you can come up. It just gives you access to the building.
I would like us to consider sidewalks even in our industrial districts, because that way employees can take walks. It makes a pleasant environment for pedestrian traffic in an industrial area. It looks nice. So having seen it like Irvine, California, I mean, it makes your industrial areas not feel quite so industrial. It ties in with the community a little bit better, so just think about that.
you see the landscaping, the berms, and
Yes.
It becomes part of the trail.
Correct.
It becomes part of the trail.
Again, employees have a place to go on lunch breaks, et cetera.
And then, part of it becomes integrated with the trail plan, and then also.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm
And
thinking.
then, and then.
Trail
TI.
plan.
On the streets, there's several here, and I would propose that those go into the city design manual, the lengths, the intersection, 60 degree is a little too steep, 80 is your current, which TxDOT only allows 90 degree intersections on theirs because of the speed, and you have to go through quite a hassle if you want to do anything but 90 degrees. And right now, your current ordinance allows intersections at 80 degrees, and this one kind of relaxes back to 60, and I'm uncomfortable with that. If we, because you can always get a street, if it's coming in at that kind of angle, you can always get them to kind of hook it into and get 90. And we can design it to make it work. So they lose a little bit of property on the way, but if you got, just if you're at that wrong angle where you can't see that car coming because of that angle, and again, it's a safety factor more than anything else. Yeah. And then about the fourth or fifth bullet down, it sets your maximum street length at 1,200 feet. I don't know if that's read differently, but your current one is at 600 feet. That's a dead-end street or without a cul-de-sac can be longer than 600 feet. And that was kind of set up by fire codes because we have stub outs for water lines and fire hydrants. So going to 1,200 feet kind of extends that long, think about, that's a quarter mile, that fire truck's gonna have to probably back up to coming out of there. So I don't know that I'd recommend changing that 600 foot right now. And look at Plano's at 600 feet, Garland's at 500 feet, Richardson's at 600 feet.
Is that our current requirement?
Currently 600. Yeah.
We're prefer to keep it at 600.
Did Georgetown get exemptions for it?
On that long stretch, well, he's talking about a dead end street. So he's not talking about anything that has a connector.
Yeah, if you have a connector coming in, it's no longer dead.
He's just talking about a dead end. So typically, without a cul-de-sac, we have potential to go to 1,200. That is an option, which we like, we
Should that be
prefer,
clarified?
we prefer to keep it at 600.
Yeah.
If they want,
Dead end?
Well, I prefer, most if not all of these street issues go into the city design manual. And then let us work through the technical part of it. Offsets, storage lanes and how long they are, all that, that's technical stuff. There's standards and, if there's things that if there's amenity, I can't imagine amenity on a turn lane other than, but if there's amenities or upgrades you want to your turn lanes or your offsets or your curved streets, we can do that.
Can I ask a quick question? On what you're proposing, what would eliminate the issue that the first Georgetown had with their, they've got a dead-end street, which basically comes to an L, which isn't as big of an issue, but you have a dead-end alley, which is a big issue.
Right.
What would you have in this that would eliminate that from ever being a problem?
no, it should have been a different phase. So that alley should have been connected in that phase, and it should have been allowed to be forward to the dead end. It should have come all the way around that last lot. Should have been developed out, and that should have been done in that phase, as opposed to it being in the phase that we just sold.
The phase never developed.
Right. But you still make them connect. You either have him, Mr. Cooley on the south end of his alley, he had a dead-end alley that was going to the future phase, which he just now preliminary platted. But he was required to put in a cul-de-sac at the end of it so that you could turn around and get out of it. And either you require them to cul-de-sac it, you basically prohibit any dead-end street, must have a cul-de-sac or make a connection. So, but that's easy to correct, and that's just, that was, I don't know how that was oversighted like that, but.
We've learned a lot from Georgetown.
It's not just, it's an every week issue for trash trucks. It's an emergency event issue for fire trucks and ambulance.
The new ordinance on Article 10 for parks dedication still keeps that 5% of the proposed lots or land area, or a calculation of the fee in lieu. If they don't want to give up the land and they want to pay a parks fee, they can do that. But it also requires an account for those funds to go into at the city so that it can be tracked. So that's a Frank and Julie and Regina issue that, is just out there for the council to oversight on.
Criminal.
It's a
True escrow.
So I did not see the 5% number in there. It sounded like it was up to the P and Z to decide what that was.
5%'s in the current ordinance.
It's in the current ordinance.
Yeah, and it's, as far as I know, it's staying in the current ordinance.
That would be my preference.
Yes,
to have a set
absolutely,
number, but
absolutely.
I did
like
not
it.
see a set number.
I thought it was there. I didn't change it to blue because they didn't change it. I didn't.
Yeah, review it.
And then Article 11 is all about construction and improvements. And again, a lot of this will be in the city design. Most of this will be in the city design manual. Just some issues to talk about is what the city pays for as we go forward. Right now, it has streetlights on boundary streets of subdivisions are required to pay 1/3 of the cost of the streetlights out on that boundary street. because with the intent that across the street would pay the other third, and then the city picks up the middle third, since that'll eventually be there. So that's what this calls for. You don't have that right now, but that's what the new ordinance calls out. Screening walls. Any screening wall construction, I would prefer the details on what, you decide what type, we'll have that type in the design manual. So, you don't worry about how it's built or what's under it. We'll have that, we'll take care of that in the design manual. You tell us that you want landscape screening and mixed screening and solid wall, or what extent, and you guys, that's what that's intended for. And then city participation, oversized and offsite extensions. Again, you got impact fees. You don't have pro rata fees at this point, which we talked about, which is that filling that gap, and that person that fills that gap pays for that oversized, that construction that they benefit from by somebody else building it for them. And then having a capital bond fund for, like we talked about, when you have bond elections, you're going to have to repay developers. You're going to create an IOU list, and that's what we did in Richardson. We created an IOU list, and then every time we had a bond, they'd come and ask me, how much do we owe developers for streets, water, or sewer? I'd tell them, and then they put that in the appropriate account, and then we get clear at that point, and then the next 4 or 5 years, they'd have to wait again. So, drainage and all drainage and channel stuff will be in the CDM. Sidewalk, you require this, if you do require a sidewalk, you make them build it now, and in some cases, you might not want them to build it, and you make them escrow the money, so that you have the money in an account. Variances and waivers. I don't want the P&Z. We need to talk about where the variances and waivers, but right now they're allowed to grant variances on intersection design, right-of-way and pavement width, turn lane requirements, alleys and sidewalks in this new ordinance. I think if any kind of variance or stuff like that, usually P&Z recommends to the council, because you're changing an ordinance or a zoning or something. So ultimately, usually P&Z would be the recommending body to the council to make any change on any of that.
That's just part of an ordinance. You're making a major change. To me, some of those are pretty major changes, and I would say it would need to go 2 steps, P&Z and then county.
Okay. And then again,
basically, if you look on like page 38, they have a little variation to go to P&Z, and then a big variation goes to council. But the same thing, you're setting that objective standard. Like for the alleys, it has to be 600 feet, right? And it says a length between 600 feet and 1,000 feet can be approved by P&Z if you find unusual conditions.
Talk about the deflection.
Yeah, deflection, and then somewhere else it talks about what goes to council too, so.
yeah, but that section there, that section 12, pay attention to that. That's kind of where, how much of the delegation of power does the council want to send down to the P&Z or the city manager to do that? And it's a pretty important decision that you would make to do that.
Yeah.
It still sets boundaries.
That just looks like some pretty big, I just don't see simple stuff right there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You could
There's a
create some big controversy.
There's a lot of safety issues in there too that I would really. And then Article 14 is your apportionment to do pro rata costs and to do all the escrow fees and all this other stuff that we're talking about. You have to do the apportionment. You have to basically verify the costs that you're going to be, that they're going to be paying, for those future developments. So take a close look at 14 also, because it establishes, it has a drainage impact fee in there, which we haven't talked about yet. A sidewalk and street escrow amount, a water and sewer pro rata, and oversized participation. So those 12 and 14 are really kind of the council's directive on, how you want to dictate the city participates, how the city allows variances and participates in new development.
So we need to study what.
Yeah, 12 and 14 are pretty critical for direction on how you want us, how that ordinance needs to be written. And then 15 is establish the 2,000 per day penalty like we talked about. Currently it's 1,000, whether it's civil or criminal, that I'll let the legalese do.
Yeah, it's a misdemeanor. I go back and look at it, but it's still it is a misdemeanor, status.
Right, and then the severability, repealing, and effective date, that's all the legal part. But Appendix A right now calls for street design standards. I am proposing to move that into Exhibit B, which is this, like we talked about, move what we can to in the city design manual that is under the engineering purview and public works purview. I think we can handle all that and we'll update you on what all those, if any changes are out there, but I'm just going to walk you through those at some future date. But for right now, just wanted to make you aware of that. How many of you have seen these documents? Jennifer's got, there's a volume 1 and a volume 2, which is your master planning, which is this plan is out of that. This is your master plan. And here's your master plan on the screen. All the yellow is that. Once we get these new subdivisions in and once we get development going forward, you need to revisit this probably every 8 to 10 years to see if the city's growing. Once development occurs up here, I think it's going to happen quickly, and it looks like it's going to start developing very quickly from this point forward. So it might be quicker than 8 to 10 years. But
Is this 15 years?
this is we're going on.
No, I mean, this is 15 years since it's been done.
It's 03. 03, so. So it's been.
Did we get a copy?
Yes, I've got it electronically, I've got steam in, I can start shipping it out to y'all. I mean, it just depends on how big of a bite y'all
Yeah.
really want to take and looking at it. I'm happy to ship it all out to y'all, but I'd like to do it in pieces and get comment back, and that way we're moving pretty good on it.
The good thing is, over the last 12 years, there hasn't been a whole lot of growth. So, and going through it, a lot of the assumptions are still the same, and a lot of the goals are still the same, and the core of where you're at is still the same. So, I mean, we've had a decade of basically no growth in the area, so it's still pretty good. I mean, it still has meets a lot of objectives and stuff like that. It even had, I wish I had known it was here. It has all the street ratings for every street in what kind of condition it was in. We came back and did that about 3 years ago. Now we're in year 3 of the repair. But
And I think that as you continue to grow rooftop, and then also, people continue to go on, everybody knows what's coming next. And that is everything that wants to serve everybody, whether it's for jobs or retail.
They're all going in there. They're all going in, right?
They are,
But-
they're going to look over us and try.
But I think that's going to be critical, and it might be, it might be a good task for PZ to go through the ETJ and look at what is a recommended development plan for the city.
So anyway, your future tasks and things coming up, we talk about the future land use plan. With that is related is your master thoroughfare plan, which is also on here and over there. If you're not familiar with, that's my only, when people bring in roadway plans like Driscoll Hill and all that other stuff, the only thing I can rely on is that little line on that map to say, oh no, that's got to be 60 or 90 or 120 foot right of way. That's the only thing. So you got to make sure we're good with that. At some point, you're going to want to update your central business district is in here too. Might want to look at the goals and upgrading Old Town area and making that happen. And then other things that we talked about, the master parks plan with the trail study and all that other stuff. And then, Frank's got started the master facilities plan, looking at building, city buildings and what, how we handle that in the future. With that, 2.5 hours.
That's great. In that parking plan, can we require the minimum amount of parking that has to be done?
Absolutely.
Depending on the amenity district. Okay. Thank y'all for your time. It's a lot to bite off. Remember in the blue in the blue, the PowerPoint is directing you to considerations and things that we want you to identify. I know that a number of y'all said that the 28th wasn't a bad day. I would love perhaps for y'all to meet next Tuesday to start dividing into this. I see some nods and then I see some people looking at the ground. So, is that too much to ask to come back next Tuesday, the 28th, and start asking a few more questions, possibly even, legal, we're going to need to get together with legal and discuss a few more things as far as rolling some things and others. But as far as making decisions on fees, as far as looks and making, refining some of these things and not ultimately adopting it or making an ultimate decision, but some of the detailed decisions, is it too much to ask y'all to come back next Tuesday and talk about some of the details?
Randy Lace have rescheduled some of my kids' games. I'm the coach, so.
And so next Tuesday is bad.
I mean, y'all can.
Well, but I mean, here's the thing about it. You have some knowledge and some experience in this that we really, I think is important to make this. So it's not all hanging on you and all be like that, but how about if I send out dates and we're trying to get it together, because I don't want to exclude you because we need that input. Is that fair to say that I'll just get with everybody and talk about dates? Yeah. Okay. I appreciate your input. Again, it's a lot of information to bite off. I know Lynn's trying to squeeze it all in and be articulate, so I appreciate it.
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
In this draft, in section D in the jurisdiction, this really probably aimed at you. It describes what, and govern all the subdivision of land within the corporate limits and the ETJ. This ordinance shall govern all of that. How is that going to govern our ETJ? I mean, what's the limitation? I mean, this sounds pretty extensive for us within a city limits. You get outside the city limits, besides the plat, there's a lot more to it just a plat.
Tell you what, why don't you, since it's late, why don't you let me type up something for you?
Okay.
And bring that back?
It's that,
Well, I mean, I'll give you a list.
okay.
Yes, people have written papers on that.
And one of the big, and
They
this
kind
is,
of put that down for you, and
this is
I'll
gonna be a
get
big
that-
question
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah, and I'll give that out to you.
Along those
Rather
same-
than rush through it in 2 minutes.
Yeah, along those
And what
same
people in the
things.
ETJ are required to do, because, they say, well, you offer us nothing, but we have to do this, and what's their fees, and all of that,
Okay.
when they start call, and they do call.
Right.
And that's untrue because we do offer part of that.
Well, they already have this, I'm talking about, not big developers, but I'm talking about ones that just have to land.
One example of where we make a commitment here is that we said in this ordinance that they have to tie into, a developer would have to tie into the city sewer system. Probably not applicable in ETJ.
Yeah, so I'll try to come up with a list for you.
But if it's larger than an acre, or an acre or larger, then they have the ability to do septic.
Right.
However, if
Maybe
it
need to add some language that says, give them that option.
If you look at something like a trailer park in your
ETJ?
in your ETJ, can you keep them out? Is there ways of passing
We
them?
want to talk about that next time too?
Okay.
I'm making a list.
Yeah, yeah.
In the
It's only
past, we were
9
told
o'clock,
we couldn't
so-
keep them out, but we could make the world strong as cricket.
I think as city,
We
we understand, we have a lot of authority within the city limits. ETJ is very,
You have
people have
some-
asked me questions.
Yeah, you have some authority. Like I said, let me get you something and we can be more efficient in taking it.
And the caveat you have here too is you have South Grayson out, mainly on the east side, but, well, on the west side too, for that matter.
Maryland.
Yeah, Maryland, yeah, I mean, you've got other providers within your ETJ, which ultimately, they'll probably be your, once the city fills in, they'll be your customers. It's just how the city transitions their services over to the city. But, you know, you've got other service providers, which kind of lends credence to, you're not supposed to allow a building permit or allow the water service or stuff like that. Well, you're not serving, your water system isn't serving, so then
We have people in the city limits that we don't have a sewer line to.
yeah, I know.
It is 8:58. At this time, is there a motion by the council that we adjourn? I have a motion and a second. All those on the council in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. Abstain. I haven't called for that vote yet. But at this time, we are adjourned, and the time is 8:58. Thank you very much for your input and for coming.
Thank you.
Except